I never thought the day would come when my own son would look me in the eye and tell me I was nobody. Not just nobody, but nobody compared to his stepdad. Those words didn't just sting, they cracked something inside me that had been holding on for decades. But funny thing about life, it has a way of proving people wrong when you least expect it. My name is Henry Lawson, 71 years old, retired electrician, and a man who's made more mistakes than he can count. I never claimed to be perfect.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you.
But I've always believed that a man's worth isn't written in trophies or bank accounts. It's written in the quiet things, keeping promises, working hard, and loving your family even when they make it hard to love them back. That's what I tried to live by. Until my son, Daniel, decided that none of that mattered. It started on a quiet Sunday afternoon in early spring. I was standing on my porch in Cedar Falls, Iowa, sipping coffee from a chipped mug that had seen better days. The tulips were just starting to bloom, and for a moment, life felt simple. Then my phone buzzed. Daniel's name flashed on the screen, a rare sight these days. I answered with a kind of hopeful nervousness that only a father knows. "Hey, Dad," he said, his voice distant. "Danny," I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. "Been a while. How's everything? How's the new job?" There was a pause, too long to be casual. "Actually, I called because we're having a barbecue next week for Mom's birthday. I thought maybe you'd want to come?" My heart lifted. My ex-wife, Claire, and I hadn't spoken much since the divorce 15 years ago, but the idea of seeing Daniel, his wife, and my granddaughter was worth any awkwardness. "Of course," I said, "I wouldn't miss it for the world." That week felt like a countdown to redemption. I even polished my old truck, bought a nice button-down shirt, and picked out a small wooden jewelry box I'd made for my granddaughter, Lily. Woodworking had become my therapy after retirement, a way to keep my hands busy and my mind quiet. When I arrived at the barbecue, laughter filled the backyard. I could see Daniel standing beside a tall, broad man I'd never met before, the kind of man who looked like he belonged in commercials for lawn mowers and craft beer. Daniel noticed me and waved, though his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Hey, Dad," he said when I reached them. "This is Tom, Mom's husband." Tom extended his hand with a wide grin. "Nice to meet you, Henry. I've heard a lot about you." "Good things, I hope," I said, trying to sound lighthearted. Tom chuckled. "Depends on who you ask." It was a joke, but something in Daniel's smirk told me it wasn't entirely one. I brushed it off, joining the others at the picnic table. Claire was busy with the grill, chatting with neighbors. Tom was in his element, telling stories about his business, his house renovations, his new fishing boat. People hung on his every word. I tried to chime in once or twice, but each time I spoke, someone cut me off. I didn't mind at first. After all, it wasn't my party. But then I noticed Daniel laughing a little too loudly at Tom's stories. Stories about being the kind of dad who fixes things around the house or knows how to plan a proper vacation. Things I used to do before the divorce took everything but my dignity. When dinner was served, I found myself sitting next to Lily. She was 8, sweet as sunshine. "Grandpa, did you really build your own treehouse when you were a kid?" "Sure did. Used old planks from the shed. Your dad helped me build one just like it when he was your age." Daniel overheard. "That thing? It fell apart in a year," he said with a chuckle. I laughed softly, but my chest tightened. Well, it wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Later that evening, after most guests had gone, Daniel came to me when I was helping clear the table. "Dad, can I be honest with you?" he said. His tone wasn't cruel, but it wasn't kind either. "Of course, son, always." He hesitated, glancing toward the house where Tom was helping Claire carry desserts. I I appreciate you coming today and all, but you don't have to keep trying so hard. Tom's been a real father figure for me these past few years. Well, he's everything you weren't. Everything I weren't, I repeated quietly. Yeah, he said, looking almost apologetic. You were always busy working or tinkering in the garage. Tom listens. He shows up. He's dependable. I stared at him for a long moment, unable to find words. The irony was sharp. I had worked 2 jobs to pay for his college, skipped meals to afford his baseball gear, and stood by every decision he made, even the bad ones. I could have shouted, argued, reminded him of every sacrifice, but instead, I just nodded. I see. He exhaled, like a weight had lifted off his shoulders. I'm glad you understand. Understand? No. But I did recognize something I hadn't before. My son wasn't cruel, he was lost. Lost in the illusion that success and comfort replaced history and love. As I drove home that night, the road blurred under the rain. I thought about turning back, about explaining everything he'd forgotten, but I didn't. Some lessons can't be taught with words. They have to be lived. And that's when I decided I would let my actions do the talking. What Daniel didn't know was that I'd spent the last 2 years quietly building something, a project I hadn't told anyone about, something that would one day make him see who I really was and what being nobody truly meant. Little did he know that day was coming sooner than he thought.
The next few months after that barbecue felt heavier than any winter I'd lived through in Iowa. There's a particular kind of cold that doesn't come from the weather. It comes from silence. The kind where you call your son and he doesn't pick up. Where birthdays pass with just a polite text message, and holidays turn into pictures you see on someone else's Facebook page. I'd been alone before, but this time it was different. This time it was chosen by him. I tried to fill my days with purpose. My garage became my refuge again. The smell of sawdust and varnish filled the air as I worked on the furniture I donated to the local church in the veterans' home. It wasn't much, but it kept my hands busy and my thoughts quiet. One day, Pastor Jim stopped by the workshop. "Henry," he said, looking around at the half-finished tables and chairs, "you ever think about doing something bigger with this talent of yours?" I chuckled. At my age, Pastor, I'm just happy if I can sand a table without my back complaining. He smiled. "I'm serious. The community center's closing down because the roof's about to give in. They need someone who knows their way around wood and nails. You could help." I hesitated. The center was where I used to take Daniel when he was little. We'd shoot hoops, build model airplanes, eat those stale vending machine sandwiches together. "I'll think about it," I said. That night I sat by the fireplace, flipping through an old photo album. There was one picture that stopped me cold. Daniel, maybe 10 years old, holding a wooden birdhouse we built together. The roof was crooked and the paint job was terrible, but the smile on his face was the kind of pure joy you don't fake. That memory hit me hard. Maybe helping rebuild the center wasn't just about wood and nails. Maybe it was a chance to rebuild something else. So I said yes. Over the next few weeks, I worked on that community center like it was my own home. The place was a wreck, cracked beams, peeling walls, a roof that leaked more than it covered. But every day, volunteers came. Neighbors, students, even folks I didn't know. They brought coffee, tools, and stories. It reminded me of what life used to feel like, when people came together not because they had to, but because they wanted to. One afternoon, while I was balancing on a ladder fixing the rafters, a familiar voice called out from below. "Need a hand up there, old man?" I froze. It was Daniel.
I climbed down slowly, brushing the sawdust from my jeans. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Didn't expect to see you here," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. He shrugged. "Mom mentioned you were working on this place. Figured I'd stop by and see it for myself." There was a pause between us, thick and uncomfortable. I handed him a hammer. "Well, if you're here, might as well make yourself useful." For a while we worked in silence. The rhythm of hammering and drilling filled the space where words should have been. Eventually he spoke. "You been doing this on your own?" I said, "Not on my own, with the community. Folks around here still believe in helping each other. It's nice." He nodded slowly. "Tom's been talking about starting something like this in town, a charity project. He's good with people." There it was again, that name. I forced a smile. "That's good. The world can always use more good men." Daniel looked at me then, studying my face like he was trying to read something that wasn't written in words. "You still do that thing? Build furniture and donate it?" "Yeah, keeps me out of trouble." He gave a faint smile, then returned to work. For the first time in years, we worked side by side. No arguments, no comparisons, just two men rebuilding something broken. A few days later, the mayor stopped by to check on progress. She was impressed. "Henry, I've seen a lot of community projects in my years, but this one has heart," she said. "When we reopen, we'd like to dedicate the hall to you." I shook my head. "No need for that, ma'am. I didn't do this for attention." Daniel overheard and smirked. "Yeah, that sounds like you, always keeping things quiet." I looked at him, unsure if it was a jab or a compliment. "Loud work doesn't always last, son. Quiet work usually does." He didn't reply, but something in his expression softened. When the grand reopening day finally arrived, the center looked brand new. Fresh paint, sturdy beams, new basketball hoops, even a small woodworking area for kids to learn craftsmanship. The town showed up in full force. Cameras flashed, the local paper interviewed volunteers, and for the first time in years, I felt seen, not just as a nobody, but as part of something bigger. Daniel showed up with his family. Lily straight ran to me, her eyes wide. "Grandpa, you built all this?" I smiled, crouching down to her level. "With a little help. You like it?" She nodded enthusiastically. "It's beautiful." That moment was worth more than any award. But what came next, I didn't expect. After the speeches, the mayor asked me to say a few words. I'm not much for public speaking, but I couldn't refuse. I walked up to the microphone, cleared my throat, and said, "They say it takes a village to raise a child. Maybe it also takes one to remind an old man that he's still needed." The crowd laughed softly, clapping. This place isn't just wood and nails. It's a promise that no matter how broken something gets, it can be fixed. You just have to care enough to try. When I stepped down, I saw Daniel standing near the back, his eyes glossy. For a second, he looked 10 years old again, holding that crooked birdhouse. He came up to me later, voice quiet. "You did good, Dad." I smiled. "Thanks, son." A few weeks after the reopening of the community center, life seemed to fall into a steady rhythm again. I'd go there 3 times a week to help kids learn basic woodworking and repair old furniture for families who couldn't afford new ones. It gave me purpose, something to look forward to. But underneath that quiet contentment, there was still a storm I hadn't faced yet. My relationship with Daniel was fragile. Better than before, sure, but still strained, like a cracked window that hadn't fully shattered. Then one morning, I got a letter in the mail that would change everything. It was from a construction company in Des Moines. My old buddy, Charlie, had passed away and left behind his business, Lockridge & Sons Construction, to be handled by whoever he named in his will. To my surprise, that whoever was me. Charlie and I had built that business from the ground up back in the late 70s, before I sold my share to him when I needed money for Daniel's education. It wasn't a massive company, but it had grown into something solid. one of the most respected local contractors in the state. And now, after all these years, it was mine again. I sat in silence for a long time, the letter trembling in my hand, not because of the money, though there was plenty of it, but because of what it meant. It was as if life was handing me one last chance to show that the things I'd done in the dark still mattered. That weekend, I drove to Des Moines to meet with the lawyers and finalize the transfer. They showed me the books, the property, and the accounts. The company was in great shape. Charlie had left detailed notes, every client, every project, every employee accounted for. I could almost hear his raspy laugh when I saw the little post-it he'd written years ago stuck on the office desk. "Don't forget, Hank, measure twice, cut once." When I got home, I decided not to tell Daniel right away. I didn't want to rub anything in his face. But word travels fast in small towns, and by the next week, he already knew. He called me out of the blue. "Dad, I heard about the company. Is it true?" "It's true," I said simply. "Charlie left it to me." There was a pause. Wow. That's a big deal." "I guess so." He hesitated, then added, "Listen, maybe we could meet. I wanted to talk about something." We met at a diner off Route 6, the same place we used to go when he was a kid. He walked in wearing a crisp shirt, looking more like the confident young man I remembered before all the distance grew between us. "So," he started, "I've been thinking, Tom and I, well, mostly Tom, have been looking to expand his contracting business. He's got investors lined up, but what he doesn't have is your kind of experience. Maybe we could work something out, like a partnership." I looked at him for a long moment, letting his words settle. There was no anger in me, no smugness, just a deep sadness. "Daniel, I appreciate the offer, but this company, it's not about making more money or proving something. It's about legacy. It's about honoring a friend who trusted me with his life's work." He sighed. "You don't get it, Dad. Tom could take this thing statewide. He's got the connections, the marketing team, and I've got my name. That's all I need." His expression tightened. "This isn't about pride. This is business." I nodded slowly. "And that's exactly why I can't do it your way. I built my life on hard work, not shortcuts." He leaned back, exasperated. "You always make everything about your principles. You could be sitting on a fortune and you'd still talk about honor and legacy." I met his eyes. "Because, son, at the end of the day, legacy is the only thing that outlives you." He didn't respond. The silence between us stretched until the waitress came by with the check. I paid it and left him sitting there, staring into his coffee. In the following months, I threw myself into rebuilding Lockridge & Sons. I rehired old workers, fixed up the main office, and started a new community outreach program that offered apprenticeships to young veterans. It wasn't easy, but it was honest work, the kind of work that built lives. One afternoon, a news crew showed up at the construction site. They were doing a segment on local businesses giving back. They interviewed me about the company's revival, the apprenticeships, and the community center restoration. I didn't think much of it. I wasn't doing it for fame. But that small interview ended up airing on a regional channel. And guess who saw it? Daniel. He called again, his voice softer this time. "Dad, I saw the news. You didn't tell me you were doing all that. Didn't think you'd be interested." I am," he said after a pause. "I didn't realize how much you were still doing. Mom and Tom saw it too. They were surprised." I chuckled. "Yeah, I bet." There was another silence, but it wasn't the heavy kind this time. It felt uncertain, like he was trying to bridge a gap he'd finally noticed. A week later, he stopped by my house. I didn't expect him, but I was glad to see him. He brought Lily with him, and she ran straight into my arms. "Grandpa, we saw you on TV. You're famous," she said, giggling. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm just an old man who knows how to swing a hammer." Daniel looked around my modest home, the same one he used to run through as a kid, and his expression softened. "Dad, I think I owe you an apology." I didn't say anything. I just waited. He continued, "I was wrong about you, about
Everything. I thought success was about who had the biggest house or the fanciest car. But you built all this without ever needing applause. I smiled faintly. You learn the truth faster when you stop comparing lives. He nodded. Yeah, I see that now. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Life has a way of testing lessons learned. And soon something would happen that would make my son realize, once and for all, why his stepdad could never hold a candle to the man he once called nobody.
Autumn rolled into Cedar Falls with its usual mix of gold leaves and cold winds, the kind that whispered of endings and second chances. By then, the construction company was running smoother than it ever had. We'd finished 2 major housing projects for low-income families, and were about to start a third. For the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt since I was a younger man: momentum. The kind that pushes you to wake up before dawn, not because you have to, but because you want to. Daniel began visiting more often after that day he came by with Lily. At first, it was small things, a quick stop to drop off lunch or to check in on the progress of one of my projects. But slowly, his visits became longer. We started talking again, really talking, about life, mistakes, choices, and how time doesn't always heal wounds, but it does give you a chance to look at them differently. One evening, as we stood outside the workshop watching the sunset, Daniel said, "You know, Dad, I told Tom about the apprenticeships you started for veterans. He said that was a great idea." I chuckled, sanding a piece of oak. "Well, I'm glad he approves." He smiled, a little embarrassed. "No, I mean it." He said not many people would do something like that without trying to make a profit. "That's because most people forgot how it feels to build something that lasts," I replied, brushing sawdust off my hands. "Money fades. Character doesn't." He nodded slowly. "You really believe that, don't you?" "I don't just believe it, son. I've lived it." We didn't talk much more that evening, but I could feel something shifting between us, a quiet respect growing back where resentment once lived. It wasn't complete, but it was real. A few weeks later, I got a call from the mayor's office. They were hosting a city event honoring local businesses that made a difference in the community, and Lockridge & Sons had been nominated for the Legacy Award. I almost turned it down. I wasn't one for ceremonies, but Daniel insisted I go. "You deserve this," he said. "Let people see what you've built." So I agreed. The event was held in the newly renovated town hall, the same building I had helped restore years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. When I arrived, I was surprised to see Daniel there with his wife and Lily sitting in the front row. Even Claire and Tom were there, dressed sharp as ever. I caught Tom's eye briefly. He nodded, polite but stiff. The evening went on with speeches, handshakes, and polite applause. When they finally called my name, the room filled with a warm cheer that made my throat tighten. I walked up to the stage, my old boots echoing against the polished floor, and took the plaque from the mayor's hands. Henry Lawson, for over 50 years of dedication to this town, its people, and its future. I stood there staring at the audience, faces I'd known for decades, people I'd worked beside, helped, and sometimes argued with, all smiling back. I took a breath and said, "You know, I once thought being somebody meant being recognized, but I've learned that real worth isn't about who claps for you. It's about who you've quietly lifted along the way." The crowd applauded, but I barely heard them. I looked toward Daniel. His eyes were glistening. Claire smiled softly beside him, and even Tom gave me a slow, respectful nod. After the ceremony, as people came up to shake my hand, Daniel stood back for a moment, letting others pass first. When it was finally just us, he said, "Dad, that was beautiful. You really are somebody." I smiled faintly. "I always was, son. You just needed to see it."
He lowered his head, ashamed but smiling. "You're right. I did." We stood there for a while, watching people leave, neither of us needing to fill the silence. Then he asked, "Dad, can I show you something?" He let me outside to the parking lot where his truck was parked. In the bed of it, I saw a set of blueprints. I asked, "What's this?" He handed them to me. "A project I've been working on. A small, affordable housing initiative near the South Side. Tom helped get the zoning approved, but I designed it. I was hoping maybe you'd take a look. I want to do it right." I studied the drawings. Simple, efficient, thoughtful. He'd done his homework. "You did this?" He nodded. "Yeah, guess I finally started paying attention to the things you used to tell me." That hit me harder than any award ever could. I put a hand on his shoulder. "Then you are already doing it right." He smiled. "I was thinking maybe Lockridge and Sons could handle the build." I looked at him, half surprised. "You mean that?" "I do," he said firmly. "And I don't want to do it with Tom's company. I want to do it with you." Something in my chest loosened, like a knot that had been there for years finally letting go. Then I said, "Then let's build it together." Over the next several months, we did just that. It wasn't easy. Weather delays, supply shortages, the usual chaos, but we stuck with it. And for the first time since he was a kid, we were on the same team again. The day we finished the last house, Daniel stood beside me on the hill overlooking the little neighborhood we'd built. Rows of modest homes, each with its own small garden and a front porch. Kids were already playing in the yards. It wasn't grand, but it was honest. "You know, Dad," Daniel said quietly, "Tom's been really supportive through all this. He even offered to sponsor the community event for the families moving in." I nodded. "That's good of him." "Yeah," he continued, "but you should have seen his face when I told him I was doing this with you instead of him." "I can imagine." He laughed too, then looked at me, his tone softening. "Dad, you were right. Being somebody isn't about who looks the most successful. It's about who leaves something behind that matters." I looked at the houses, the people moving in, the laughter echoing down the street. I said, "You finally get it. And that's what matters to me." For a long moment, we just stood there, watching the sunset spill gold across the rooftops. The wind carried the smell of fresh paint and cut grass, a new beginning. But what Daniel didn't know was that I still had one more thing planned, something that would seal this lesson forever, something that would make him understand, without a shred of doubt, just how wrong he was the day he told me I was nobody. Because sometimes the greatest surprises come not from what you say, but from what you leave behind.
The morning of the dedication ceremony for the housing project dawned bright and crisp, the kind of October day that made everything look sharper, clearer. The neighborhood was alive with laughter and chatter as families carried boxes into their new homes. Banners fluttered, kids ran around with balloons, and a small stage had been set up near the first house we built. On it, a sign read, "The Lawson Grove Community, Built with Heart." I stood at the edge of the crowd, hands in my pockets, watching it all. Daniel was on stage with the mayor, his wife beside him, and little Lily holding a pair of oversized scissors for the ribbon cutting. I wasn't supposed to speak that day, but watching him up there, steady, proud, and finally grounded, I felt something inside me settle. Maybe this was enough. Maybe this was the moment I'd been waiting for all these years. Then the mayor took the mic and said, "Before we continue, we have one more special moment. This project wouldn't exist without the vision and work of a man who has given this town decades of his life, Mr. Henry Lawson." The crowd turned, clapping and cheering. I hesitated, embarrassed as always by the attention, but Daniel motioned me forward with a grin.
"Come on, Dad. This is your day too." I walked up, each step heavier than the last, not from age, but from emotion. When I reached the mic, I looked out at all those faces, people who once saw me as the quiet old man who just fixed things in his garage, now standing in a neighborhood built with my own hands. "I don't have a long speech," I began, my voice rough. "Just a few words. Years ago, someone I loved told me I was nobody. At the time, it hurt more than I can explain. But I realize now it wasn't anger that said it. It was confusion. Because in this world, people get mixed up about what being somebody really means." The crowd was silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. "Being somebody isn't about being known. It's about being remembered. For kindness, for honesty, for showing up when others don't. It's about leaving behind more good than you found." Daniel's eyes met mine from across the stage. I could see tears forming, and I knew he remembered that day, those words that had once broken me. I smiled faintly. "So, if you ever feel like nobody, just remember, you still have time to build something that lasts. You can always be somebody to someone." The applause came slowly at first, then built into a standing ovation. I nodded politely and stepped down, heart pounding with a strange peace. After the ceremony, Daniel came over, his face flushed with emotion. "Dad," he said, his voice breaking, "I'll never forgive myself for what I said to you back then." I put a hand on his shoulder. "Don't waste your life on guilt, son. I've already forgiven you a long time ago." He shook his head. "No, you don't get it. I spent years trying to be like Tom, thinking success was about money and image. But you were building something real all along." I chuckled softly. "Takes some of us a while to see what's right in front of us." He hugged me then, the deep, unguarded hug that said all the things words couldn't. It was the kind of hug I've been waiting for years, the kind that says, "I see you now." Over the next few months, life found a new rhythm. Daniel started volunteering at the community center, teaching kids basic carpentry. Tom, to his credit, supported it wholeheartedly. He even showed up one day to donate materials and shake my hand, saying, "You raised a good man, Henry." I just smiled. Took some of us a while to see what's right in front of us. Winter came, and with it, a quiet calm. I spent most of my days in the workshop, building small furniture for the new residents in Lawson Grove. Rocking chairs, picture frames, even a few birdhouses. Each one I stamped with a small brass plate that read, "Built by Henry Lawson with heart." One evening, as the snow began to fall outside, Daniel stopped by with Lily. She ran into my workshop, her laughter filling the room. "Grandpa, Daddy said you're teaching him to build again." I looked over at Daniel, who grinned sheepishly. "She's not wrong," he said. "We're starting with the birdhouse this weekend, just like the one you and I made when I was her age." My heart swelled. "That's a good start. Just make sure she does most of the work." Lily giggled. "I will." After they left, I sat alone for a while, listening to the wind whistle through the eaves. On my workbench sat the last thing I'd been building in secret for months, a small wooden box with Daniel's name carved into it. Inside was a letter and a key. The letter explained everything, how I'd arranged for the company to eventually become his, how I'd set up scholarships in the Lawson name for local kids studying trades, and how, no matter what life threw his way, he'd never again be nobody. The key was to the office at Lockridge & Sons. It would be his when the time was right. I closed the lid gently and smiled. 2 weeks later, I wasn't feeling well. The cold hit me harder that winter, and my heart wasn't what it used to be. One evening, I sat in my chair by the window, watching the snow fall outside Lawson Grove.
The streetlights shimmered on the snow-covered roofs, and I thought about how far we'd all come, from anger to forgiveness to peace. That was the last memory I carried with me before drifting off to sleep. Months later, Daniel stood in my old workshop, tears rolling down his cheeks as he held the wooden box. Lily was beside him, tracing her small fingers over the carving. He opened the letter, read it once, then twice, and smiled through the tears. Outside, in the cold quiet of winter, the sign at the community entrance caught the sunlight just right. The Lawson Grove Community, built with heart. Daniel placed the letter back in the box, whispering, "You were never nobody, Dad. You were everything I ever needed to be." And in that moment, he finally understood. Legacy isn't about being remembered by the world. It's about being remembered by the ones who carry your lessons forward. Henry Lawson had been called a nobody once, but standing there, surrounded by what his hands and heart had built, his son knew the truth. He was never nobody. He was the foundation everything else stood on.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.